As we work through those audio issues there, folks, let us know if they're still happening in the comments section. But we are going to talk today about the Rebecca Park case, what is now a death investigation. This case is now 1 month old as of December 3rd. It started back on November 3rd in Wexford County, and 30 days later, we got the biggest developments yet in the case yesterday afternoon when Rebecca's biological mother, Courtney Bartholomew, as well as her husband, Brad, went in front of a judge in Wexford County and were formally charged with killing Rebecca and her unborn baby. Before we go any further, we're just going to caution you that some of the details that we might discuss here are pretty gruesome. The prosecutor revealed some pretty horrifying details yesterday about what they say happened back on November 3rd, happened a month ago, and the details that Courtney and Brad are now accused of doing as the charges are discussed here. So if you have any questions about the investigation, feel free to drop them in the comments section, whether that's here or on Facebook, or if you're watching over on YouTube, and we'll do the very best that we can to answer those questions as they come into us. The two big questions that we got sent to us on Facebook, and have even had people reaching out today asking us about, is do they know where Rebecca's baby is, and what's the possible motive? We'll start with the location of Rebecca's baby. As far as we know from investigators, they are still looking for it. Strong indication from the charges, what the prosecutor has said yesterday, they are looking for a body at this point. I don't think there's belief among investigators that the baby is with us anymore, so they are still in the process of trying to find the body of a 38-week-old baby. Rebecca was 38 weeks pregnant when she disappeared. We understand she had been to the hospital not terribly long before. We understand she was likely killed, and she was dilated at that point, so that would mean childbirth was likely very close at that point. The other big question that we are waiting on is motive. Why? Prosecutors laid out yesterday that they believe Courtney and Brad lured Rebecca to that house in Boone Township in Wexford County. They said they drove her into the woods, and that is where they stabbed her, trying to remove the unborn baby from her, and the injuries that Rebecca suffered and the process of trying to remove the baby from the womb took the lives of both that unborn baby and as well as the life of Rebecca. As far as a motive for any of that, we have not heard yet. It's safe to assume that this investigation, there's still a lot of questions that are going, that investigators are trying to answer, still a lot of interviews they are likely trying to do. There's a very strong possibility that more charges could be on the way in this case as well. You'll remember Rebecca's sister Kimberly is currently being held in Wexford County on several charges, including filing a false police report, lying to a police officer, and tampering with evidence. Another big question that we've been getting is, could Courtney and Brad be charged federally? You'll remember that Rebecca's body was found last Tuesday in the Manistee National Forest. That is federal property, and that opens the door to the possibility of a federal prosecution here. That is significant because you bring in the option or the possibility of this being tried as a death penalty if a federal prosecution chose to move forward. There's a lot of details that would go into that. We're talking to some law experts at Cooley Law School today about this case and about that possibility. So I don't want to get into too much detail. I'm not a legal expert by any means, but we are going to try to have that answer for you tonight at 5 and 6. We don't know in terms of where Rebecca's body was found in the Manistee National Forest. We don't know if the body was moved there. We don't know if that is the location where she was killed or was stabbed and later died. Those details would be significant when you talk about the possibility of a federal prosecution getting involved here and taking this case. So that's where that stands right now, but certainly a lot of people very interested in that. Just to recap, because there's been some more questions about the body of Rebecca's baby. They have not found that body yet. That is our understanding from investigators. They are still trying to go through the process of locating that body. Jay Kaiser Smith wants to know if a federal prosecution, would this be moved to federal courts? I'm not sure on that, to be honest. I'm not sure if there would be a local prosecution that would run alongside the federal prosecution. But if the feds wanted to get involved, a federal case would be tried almost certainly in the Western District of Michigan, and they have a courthouse that's located in Grand Rapids. A couple of people asking about where Courtney and Brad are being held. Yes, they are being held in separate jails. Courtney is being held in the Wexford County Jail, and Brad, we understand, is being held over in Lake City in the Missaukee County Jail. And the reason for that is yesterday, the judge in Wexford County placed an order when he was doing these arraignments that Courtney and Brad were to have absolutely no contact with each other. And sometimes you'll see that when people have close relationships in cases and are facing similar charges. So both of them are in separate locations, and that's because the judge put that no contact order in place. Hannah wants to know, did they admit to the crime, or is someone else involved? We don't know at this point, Hannah. We haven't seen any interviews. We haven't had a chance to send in records requests to get a hold of any sort of interrogation police might have done with Courtney, Brad, Kimberly, who's Rebecca's sister, or Richard, Rebecca's fiance. So we don't know what sort of set this into motion, but here's the timeline that we do have. Rebecca's body was found a week ago. The next day, her sister and her fiance were charged in Wexford County. Richard is still being held on unrelated drug charges, but is on a $1 million bond. That is unusually high for fairly minor drug charges. We don't know who started saying what, who may have said what to police, who may have tipped police off. I think with the timeline of this case and how long it was dragging out, police, I think, had a hard time getting to the bottom of what was truly going on. Because you'll remember when this first happened, when we first started reporting on it back on November 4th, what investigators were told by Courtney Bartholomew, according to that initial press release, is that Rebecca had gotten into a vehicle with dark tinted windows, said she had someone coming to pick her up, and that vehicle took off. Deputies told us Courtney told them she did not see who was driving, and the vehicle took off. Rebecca's cell phone was found a short time later, and that is how this all started, and that was sort of the first story that we got in this investigation. You'll remember several days later, 9 and 10's Jody Meeson sat down with Courtney, and that was the exact story that Courtney told our 9 and 10's Jody Meeson. Kimberly also said that it was not unusual for Rebecca to go missing. What was unusual is that they had not heard from her. Would seem to indicate now, at least that story being told to investigators is part of the charges that Kimberly is facing. Remember, she's charged with lying to investigators and filing a false police report. So prosecutors certainly believe that there was not truth-telling going on from the start. Just to back up on a couple of questions, Mandy wants to know, how are Courtney and Brad related? So Courtney is Rebecca's biological mother, but Courtney also had an adoptive mother, and Brad is the current husband of Courtney. But it is our understanding he did not really have a father, was not a father figure, did not have like a father relationship with Rebecca. Excuse me, there as I stuttered. Becky wants to know, do they know how long she was dead for? We do not know that, Becky. We just don't know the answer to that question. She was reported missing late on November 3rd. That was when investigators were told, hey, she was last seen, and now prosecutors are saying the initial story they got was not true, that Courtney and Brad lured her to that location, drove her into the woods, and that is where they stabbed her and killed her. Just going through some comments here. Any info? Carlene's asking, any info on evidence given yet? Not yet, Carlene, but we know that law enforcement on Sunday was at Courtney and Brad's house out in Boone for several hours, and when they're there, they could be looking for anything. DNA swabs, handwriting samples, electronic devices. In this day and age, with a crime like this, there's almost certainly electronic evidence that is collected, smartphone evidence that is collected. Our lives are on our smartphones, so there's certainly electronic evidence that they're going through. We also know that we're also waiting to see the final results from the autopsy that was performed this past week. And I think somebody asked in one of our comments yesterday if there was anything that was found possibly in Rebecca's system. So that would be a toxicology report, and toxicology reports typically take longer than the initial autopsy. So an initial autopsy is going to give you a cause of death fairly quickly, so you'll understand how someone died. But as far as different components that could have been in a person's system, those toxicology reports take several weeks and possibly several weeks for those results to get in. So once the autopsy report is complete, we're hoping to get a copy of it, because that could give us a better sense of what was at play here, and possibly as far as drugs, alcohol, anything else like that. Somebody asking if the death penalty will be sought in this case. That could only happen if there's a federal prosecution. Right now, it is only a local/state level prosecution, so the Attorney General's office is involved in this case as well. And if it's because it's a local prosecution, the option for a death penalty is not there. Courtney and Brad are, with the charges they are facing right now, you're looking at a strong possibility of life in prison if convicted on. There's, I think, 8 charges for each of them. And I think I don't remember off the top of my head, but looking at the charging documents there, at least several of the charges, if they're convicted on just one of them, carry the possibility of life in prison. So just catching up on some of the comments here.
People are asking why we're going to protest. Explain our process.
Yeah, so a couple questions about not covering the protest that happened there. At that point, there were no charges that had been filed. Nothing had even been connected publicly yet to Courtney and Brad, possibly even having any criminal culpability in there. So if we were to show up there and somehow start to convict as a news organization in the court of public opinion, it would be frankly irresponsible on our part to begin convicting somebody in the court of public opinion without any charges filed in that situation. So, you know, and also it was a very, very tense situation at the house as those protests were going on. And we, as a family-owned, locally owned news organization, are not apt to put our reporters in a situation where things could escalate, potentially get out of control, and potentially have some of our reporters get hurt. So it's not that we were ignoring the protest, but it was not a situation that we felt that we were comfortable putting our reporters in. There's a lot that's been flying around on social media, a lot of rumors that have been flying around on social media, and we, as a news organization, do not report social media rumors, social media speculation. We rely on court documents, official police reports. So there's a lot of, we have to stick with court documents, with stuff that's in official interviews, everything like that. We can't go speculating and putting social media rumors out there. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline. that happened here. Rebecca was reported missing late on November 3rd, early on November 4th. That's sort of the timeline that we were dealing with. Investigators were told she was seen getting into a dark vehicle, tinted windows, and her biological mother did not see who was driving. Her cell phone was found not far along a 2-track, and that is sort of where this investigation stood for several days. A few days later, I think it was about a week later, the Wexford County Sheriff's Office put out a pretty lengthy press release about where they stood on this investigation, still investigating it very much as a missing persons case. I think based on the information that they were being told by Rebecca's family, they understood that Rebecca potentially had come into some money that would have allowed her to disappear off the grid. We know they had reached out to some out-of-state law enforcement agencies. We're not sure or haven't been able to connect the dots on why they were looking out of state. At this point, they were looking in hospitals. They were looking with any agency that potentially could have come into contact with Courtney's baby, because we know, based off what investigators were told, Courtney was likely very close to giving birth when she disappeared. It was about a week and a half later that some volunteer search efforts started being organized that we covered, that started heading out into the Boone Township area in Wexford County to try and find Rebecca. And these were some pretty sizable search efforts, volunteer search efforts, groups of people concerned for Rebecca's well-being who came together to try and find her. And those search efforts really didn't turn up anything until last Tuesday when they came across Courtney's body. What we don't know, Rebecca's body. Excuse me. To correct that. They came across Rebecca's body last Tuesday. One of these volunteer search efforts did. What we don't know is where they found her body, if this was the location where she had been stabbed and later killed, or if her body had been moved at some point. It was some 15 feet, relatively close to Courtney and Brad's house where her body was found. But again, we don't know if that is where she was killed or where she died, or if the body was somehow moved into a different location. I lost my train of thought there, folks. Investigators told us that night that the baby was not with Rebecca, and that is really what kicked off this search. That is really what gave, I think, investigators the go-ahead to go to a judge and say, look, we've got probable cause to really kick this investigation into high gear. We don't know when Rebecca died. That's kind of one of the big questions that are out there. So if there are any other questions, feel free to ask them. Again, the big questions that we're still waiting on answers are from investigators. We don't know where the body of Rebecca's baby is at this point, and we don't have an answer on motive. I think this is a case that has really troubled a lot of people. Dan, we might be frozen if you want to check the feed. We're good? Okay. And it's a case that, frankly, has shocked Wexford County. We were talking here in our newsroom. This is, without a doubt, one of the worst cases our news organization has ever covered, based on the allegations that prosecutors laid out. Just an absolutely horrific case, some horrific allegations, and it's a case that we are going to continue following. So we appreciate you joining us this afternoon, everybody. Stick with us. You can read all of our coverage right now on 910news.com. But again, the big development, the biological mother of Rebecca Park, Courtney Bartholomew, and Courtney's husband, Brad, charged yesterday with killing Rebecca as well as with killing her unborn baby. So a lot of court dates that are going to be coming up. We'll do our best to stay on top of it, and we will keep you updated on any developments as they continue. So thank you for sticking with us, and keep engaging with us. We'll hope to get you some answers, some questions, answer the questions that that you still have. And again, just appreciate you guys following along and engaging with us on all these platforms. And we appreciate your viewership and appreciate you following the story. I know it's horrific, but again, just thank you for sticking with us, trusting us, and we'll be here until this case sees a resolution, however long that may take. Take care, everybody.